All right. Thank you for joining us today, whether you are watching or listening. We are getting into nutrition again. I'm calling this nutrition part two with a focus on application. So we're going to, briefly review some of the concepts we talked about in part one, but get more into, how to put that into action today. So again, if you're just listening, some of the things might come up that are, we have a visual graphic. We'll do our best to explain that for you. But regardless, again, thanks for being here. Peter, what's the most recent change you've made to your nutritional habits?
This was good question. Thinking about my day and where I get myself into trouble, I tend to just when I get jamming at work and there's certain deadlines and things that get done, I tend to just put everything else on the back burner, but just trying to get those things done. So usually later in the day, I'll find I'm getting a little bit famished. My body starts hurting, get a little achy. And again, when I go home, I'm just way beyond hungry, kind of get a little almost hangry. So that's been a big important goal of mine is we do a great job with meal prepping over the weekends, but being able to bring a little bit more to work and make myself stop and eat, even if I have to set an alarm for those days that I'm really struggling to do that. But if I take that extra time middle of the day to have a meal that I prepared, it's helped me tremendously with just having good even keel energy, especially if I'm training later in that day.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's a good one. Mine's smaller. I made some bigger changes a little bit ago, but my most recent one was just trying to get some of my carbohydrate choices to move more towards the whole food end of the spectrum. So I've changed my morning toast to half a sweet potato recently.
And
So
why did you choose sweet potato?
I was already doing a piece of fruit with my eggs, and I just wanted something different. And they're easy. They're 89 cents at Trader Joe's. I
Oh,
can cut
deal.
it in half, chop it up, microwave it for 2.5 minutes. It's easy. So convenient, satiating, whole food, got the job done.
Love it. Love
Yeah.
it.
All right. So, how are you going to make some changes just like that? Let's go first to, again, a quick review of part one. What is good nutrition? Any approach that gets you the intake you need to meet your nutrient and energy requirements to be healthy and enjoy the process. Right. So that's, again, nice vague statement, but at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do. Okay. Um, what concepts did we cover in part one? What were those big concepts that we know matter for everybody? Number one, understanding the energy balance equation. Right? So calories in versus calories out. That's going to determine whether you are losing weight, gaining weight, or maintaining weight. And how to manipulate that equation to your advantage is something we'll be talking about today. Concept number two, focusing on protein. Just an irreplaceable nutrient necessary to build muscle mass and for a host of other functions in the body. Your body can't synthesize all 20 amino acids that make up protein, so you need to get this from your diet. And it's, on top of that, it's satiating. So even if you're trying to lose weight, you still want protein high. Okay. Number three, get your fruits and veggies. Again, just micronutrient dense foods here that are just correlated with better outcomes in every sense. Decreased risk of all your major chronic diseases, and they're also just again a nutrient dense, fiber dense, satiating way to get some of your carbohydrate intake in without taking in a ton of excess calories. And then lastly, prioritizing whole food over processed food in general. Foods aren't really, in one camp or the other here. There's not good or bad foods. There's kind of a spectrum of more processed foods to whole foods, going from like a cupcake to pasta to sweet potato, but just the closer you can get on that end of the spectrum towards whole food, again, you're going to be getting more nutrient dense food, less calorically dense food. You will, be healthier and feel full with less caloric intake.
And I'm sure all you guys, if you've kind of followed this hierarchy, we don't need to, tell you any different. We don't need to preach to the choir. This is something I'm sure you've experienced yourself when you've done really well in those days, and maybe you haven't when you had a, special celebration or party. So, yeah, just a good reminder of what we kind of covered in part one. We'll put a little link in the bottom of the notes just to remind you guys in case you forget or want to go back and kind of recheck back in on it.
Yeah. Yeah. And so just focusing on these big habits, that alone will take you far. Especially two, three, and four. They alone will often put people's energy balance equation in the place where they want it to be naturally. But how can we dive a little deeper today on truly building the plan to get you where you want to be? Okay, so that's our main goal today. How do you build a plan that follows these big concepts and gets you where you want to go? We're going to cover 7 steps. Okay, we're going to dive into each of them. We'll take our time, but just to give you a little overview so you know where we're going. Step 1, determine the goal. What are you trying to do? Okay. Step 2, determine your current baseline. Where are you at right now? What are you currently doing? Step 3, figure out what you need to be doing. Figure out your protein, calorie or total intake goals, and kind of your macronutrient goals. How you carbohydrate and fat intake. What should you be doing to get you from your baseline to your goal? Okay. And then how to put that in action, how to build your plate based on that. Okay, so all those numbers you're going to figure out in part 3 are great, but what does that actually look like on a plate? Okay. Once you figure out what your plate looks like, well, how do you go get that food? How do you build a grocery list based on that? Once you do that, how do you prepare those meals? How do you get them from fridge to on your plate? And then lastly, how to adjust if that plan doesn't go well, right? Okay, I did all these steps and it still didn't work out the way I wanted it to, either because you weren't consistent or just didn't like your new habit, or you did the habit and it still didn't get you the results you wanted. Then what do you do? Yeah. So step 1, determine the goal. Okay, most goals fall into one of 3 camps. Which are you? Number 1, gain weight by building muscle mass. Number 2, lose weight by losing primarily body fat. Okay. Or goal 3, maintain weight, but improve body composition or health or athletic performance, something along those lines. Yeah, so most goals will fall into one of these 3 camps. We're going to go through a hypothetical client, Roger, to kind of guide you through each of these steps. And we're going to take Roger from where he's at now to where he wants to be. So Roger's 47 years old, fairly active, strength trains 2 to 3 times a week. He wants all of these things. Most of us, when you say, hey, which one do you want? Look, I'd love all that. I'd love to build muscle and lose fat and improve my health, right? But hey, which one is his main priority? Fat loss. He wants to fit into an old suit for his 30-year high school reunion, impress his friends. He'd like to get from 220 pounds to 200 pounds in the next 6 months. Okay. He works a moderately stressful job, but sleeps 7 hours a night still. Lives with his wife and 2 kids, so he's got a good support system at home. So his life's in a place where he thinks he can focus on nutrition and make some changes.
Something I want to point out here, which I think is very something that gets overlooked so much, is we have this goal, we're determining it. What's our why? We have to have a very strong why. This guy's got, Roger, he's got his 20 pounds that he wants to lose. He has a suit he wants to fit in. He wants to, bring his wife and show off his kids and that. But he's got a very, very specific reason for why he's doing this. And if that reason is because there's going to be plenty of days he's going to get up, he's not going to want to follow along. He's not going to want to do this, but he has a purpose, and that purpose is strong enough for him to make the change. So that's something too, that as we talk about that reassessment, sometimes our why is not strong enough to cause that change. It's not painful enough. So that's a really, really big, important thing. And I know a lot of people in January, all the resolutions, there's all these fun things. And then, what's the odds that people, competed or go to completion are very minimal. A lot of it is just that why is just not there. It's something else. Maybe even, hey, Kyle wants it for me, so I'm going to try to do it for him. But I was like, I don't care about him anymore. Whatever that might be. So that's just make sure you really spend that time and that thought and that energy to why is this important? And then it'll make this so much easier.
Yeah, thanks for elaborating on that. Yeah, determine the goal and determine your why. Precision nutrition loves the 5 whys exercise. So, Roger's why here is fit into an old suit. We could ask him, well, why do you want that? Okay, well, why is that important? Well, why is that important? And, get to a true deep why. Okay. So next step, determine your current baseline. What are you doing now? Okay. So to know how to improve, we need to know where you're at now. Okay. So you need to create, some form of a food journal, ideally with like 3 to 7 days of data, just so you have a little bit bigger sample size than just looking at one day. Using either something like Exact Intake in MyFitnessPal or another tracking software like that, or Precision Nutrition hand portions, which you have a visual here on the screen. A palm is kind of the hand portion serving size of protein, a fist for a serving of vegetables, a cupped handful of carbohydrate or fruit, and then a thumb-sized serving of fats, like oils or nuts or something like that. Okay.
And then if you're going to do, say, a shorter, like a 3-day, try to include at least 1 weekend to go with 2 weekdays, just so you get a really good balance. I mean, if you're doing 7 days, I don't know how you don't include a weekend.
Yeah, yeah. Well said. But yeah, don't only track your good days and be like, I don't know how I'm going to improve if your weekends are terrible. You should take that into account, right? And one thing you might find during this step is that even just tracking your habits often already makes you improve them. So you might only get to this step and already start to see some positive changes just because you're making it aware to yourself what's going on.
Almost every time.
Yeah. Okay. So after determining we're going to elaborate more on determining your baseline. Let's look at Roger's typical day. Okay. So Roger for breakfast is taking in, quick protein and peanut butter shake, just a couple pieces of toast out the toaster, and having some coffee at home before he heads out the door on his way to work. Yeah. For lunch, he's often out to eat for lunch just because it's convenient and easy, and his work's right in the middle of a nice district with lots of fancy options. So he's burrito and chips or sandwich and fries, something like that in the middle of the day. Dinner's doing pretty good. He's got nice lean protein for dinner, some sort of starchy side, veggies on the side, and snacks. He often has a little piece of Go back there.
Just a second.
Yeah, uno momento. Um,
There we go.
There we go. Cool. So snacks. He's having a piece of fruit mid-morning after that quick breakfast. After he gets the kids home from school, he's having some crackers with them in the afternoon, and then often kind of winds down with a little dessert and a glass or two of wine in the evening. Okay. So plugging that into MyFitnessPal, we see that Roger's typical day has him around 3,400 calories. Okay, so again, doesn't mean that's good or bad, but that's just, hey, that's what he's doing now. And if you just kind of give a quick overview of his day, pretty breakfast is on the smaller end. Sneaky high calorie lunch there with kind of the processed out to eat food. Dinner's doing pretty dang good, and then those snacks add up a little bit throughout the course of the day. Okay. Looking at his typical day through the lens of Precision Nutrition hand portions, we can kind of look at his breakfast here as kind of a 1 palm of protein, 2 handfuls of carb with that toast, a thumb of fat from the peanut butter. His lunch, it's kind of harder to say. One thing that you'll notice if you're doing your tracking, it's out to eat meals, you don't know exactly what went into them. So often his palm of protein there, 1 to 2, kind of depending on what he ate for lunch that day. But carbohydrate and fat can be probably like 3 to 4 each. If you're having a big tortilla wrapped around your burrito, that could be a couple handfuls of carbohydrate right there. Not to mention the rice and beans inside. If you're having a big burger with buns and a couple handfuls of potatoes for fries, plus it's all kind of soaked in oil and loaded up with yummy dressing and sauces because they want you to come back. But again, it can add up pretty fast, even though that meal didn't seem much bigger than say like his dinner, where he had a couple palms of protein, cooked in some olive oil, a starchy side, some veggies. But just because he was kind of in control of how he made that meal, he kind of knows exactly what he had for dinner there, which is kind of 2 palms of protein, 2 handfuls of carbohydrate, 2 thumbs of fat, and a fist of veggies. Yeah. And then snacks. He added some fruit in the morning, crackers, a little brownie for dessert, and a couple glasses of wine. I just put those all in the carbohydrate category. Something like alcohol, you could make its own column for that if you want, but just know that a 1 standard drink you could kind of equate to the caloric intake of a handful of carbohydrate or a thumb of fat. So we're just, for simplicity's sake, we're just putting that all into the carbohydrate section. So looking at his total, he's at 4 or 5 palms of protein, 12 to 13 handfuls of carbohydrate or fruit, 6 to 7 thumbs of fat in a day, and 1 fist of veggies. Again, not good or bad right now. Just, hey, that's just what he's doing right now. Yeah. So what is he trying to do? So step 3, we're going to figure out his protein goal, his total calorie goals, and then his other kind of macronutrient goals. Let's start with protein. Yeah. If you recall from part 1, a great spot to be is kind of 0.7 to 1 grams per pound of your body weight per day in your protein intake. Yeah, that's just going to give you the intake you need to either build muscle if you're in a caloric surplus, or at least maintain muscle if you're going for more of a caloric deficit. This is your thrive, not survive level of protein here. A little bit above kind of that recommended daily allowance that is almost comically low. Okay. You could also convert this into palms of protein. Thinking of 1 palm at about 25 grams of protein. So for Roger, this would put him at 140 to 200 grams of protein in the day, or about 6 to 8 palms of protein be his protein goal. And for total calories, a few different methods you could use here. Yeah, so number 1, you could just kind of make an estimate of where you should be at using these guidelines from Precision Nutrition. About 13 to 15 times your body weight if the goal is weight loss, about 15 to 17 times the goal body weight for maintenance, and about 17 to 19 times the goal body weight for weight gain. Yeah, so there's a lot of numbers. I'll say it one more time: 13 to 15 for weight loss, 15 to 17 for maintenance, 17 to 19 for weight gain times your goal body weight. Okay, so for Roger, 13 to 15 times his goal body weight of 200 pounds puts him at like 2,600 to 3,000 calories a day. Yeah. That was method 1. Okay, method 2, use your current baseline calories and adjust 300 to 500 calories a day in the direction you're trying to go. Again, that first number is just a general estimate. If you know what you are doing right now, and your weight is unchanging, like you've been at that weight for a little bit, that weight is, or that caloric intake is your kind of maintenance intake. So just adjusting off that should start to move the needle in the direction you're trying to move it. Okay. So for Roger, we only plugged in 1 day for Roger, but say that was his 3 to 7 day large sample size average. We'd be trying to go from about 3,400 calories to kind of 2,900 to 3,100, somewhere around there.
And something here we're looking is not huge changes. Like we're not trying to go from 3,400 down to 2,600. That's, yeah, you might see a little bit of a response up front, but long term, it's not as sustainable, and your body will tend to adapt to that new level, that new marker a little bit quicker. So we kind of want to do some small step downs for trying to hit both of those buckets.
Yeah, yeah, make it sustainable, and don't freak the body out. Yeah. Um, method number three, you could also use those hand portions. So use your current baseline hand portions, and then adjust like 2 to 4 portions of carbohydrate or fat total over the course of the day. Again, in the direction you're trying to go, down or up. So for Roger, he was around 18 to 20 kind of carbohydrate and fat portions in his day. Could we move him down to like 15 to 16, somewhere around there, right? We might not do that all at once, but we're going to try to move in that direction. Yeah. And then for the other macronutrients, carbohydrate and fat. Okay. Diets equated for total calories and protein perform the same at the population level over time. Yeah, so what does that mean? Okay, if person 1 is having 3,000 calories and person 2 is having 3,000 calories and their protein's the same, but the carbohydrate and fat ratio that makes up the rest of the calories differs. Over time, those should perform the same. Again, at the population level on average. So in short, don't worry about this a ton. Just kind of divvying up the rest of your calories between carbs and fats is probably fine. But if you wanted to, you would just have your total calorie goal that you got from one of those methods on the previous slide. Subtract the calories that are going towards protein, which would be 4 calories times the grams of protein. Proteins are 4 calories per gram, and then divvy up the rest of the calories as desired between carbs and fat. Peter, what are some reasons you might want to bias one or the other there?
So well, a couple of things. One is we're looking for sustainability. So if there's certain foods that I tend to like more, I'm already making a couple of these changes with maybe adding a little bit more protein. I might stick with some of the foods that make me kind of feel good and don't feel like I dieting per se. I like to think of this more as feeding or refueling the body versus the diet. I just hate that stigma there. So thinking about, that you could start with that with, hey, I tend to like a little bit more carbohydrates with my morning meal. I tend to like a little bit more fat with maybe, okay, great. Let's stick with that. So you can kind of maintain a certain balance. Then as you start to get into a little bit more, if you're somebody who's generally fairly sedentary, I don't really need a lot of fuel because I'm only, driving say 10 miles, per se in my body versus if I'm having to commute 50 miles there and back, 100 miles. So generally your body will tend to gravitate towards needing a little bit more energy to get from, point A to point B. So you'll tend to kind of raise up the carbohydrate intake and the fat intake down a little bit more. Or versus, again, if you tend to sit at a desk job for 8 to 5 and at lunchtime you walk a half a block, but that's about all your movement for the day. And you get home, sit on the couch. Well, we might, let's bring the carbohydrate intake down a little bit, bring up the fat intake to just help with that satiating aspect of that. But mostly important is just kind of pick something you feel good with and roll with it. And then we can reassess later down the line, see how that worked.
Yep. And what's the big concept that matters? Changing that energy balance equation. Exactly how you do it is kind of up to you. You can play around with both and see what gives you the most success, what feels the least restricting to you.
Yeah, everybody's different, and we don't want to. You got to fit in this box. It's like no, there is no box there. We're going to give you some, like I said, you're seeing some big, kind of bulletproof or bullet points, and then from there you have some play to figure out what's best for you, what's best for your approach. There's a whole lot of different theories on some of this, but just figure out what works best for you and makes you feel good.
Cool. Okay. So let's go now to step 4: how to build your plate based on those protein and total intake goals that we've already set for you. Okay. So take your total protein, carb, fat, and veggie targets. Okay. So for Roger, we're going to try to bump his protein up a little bit, bump it up to like 6 to 8 palms of protein in a day. We're going to try to bring his carbohydrate intake down, around 15, portions a day there. And we're going to try to ramp his veggie intake up a little bit too. We didn't talk about that yet because it doesn't factor a ton into the caloric equation. But just more nutrient dense, and it's going to make him feel fuller because he's just bringing in some kind of high fibrous, large like volume foods, like 200 calories of broccoli takes up a lot of space in your stomach. So these increasing vegetable intake will help him feel satiated still despite decreasing the carbohydrate and fat intake.
And also, just for the eye, when you look at your plate and all of a sudden you're taking away 4 or 5 things, you're like, oh, hey,
Yeah.
this isn't cool. I'm on a diet all of a sudden, per se. And then it's like, well, no, I'm replacing this with something voluminous and something big, adding some color that tends to help the person. Oh, okay. And it causes them again to chew a little bit more too. So there's some psychological things behind it.
Yep. So now we're going to take those total targets, divide by the number of meals per day. Don't forget about your snacks, but basically just kind of distribute those portions across the day. So, looking at Roger's new hand portions plan here, he's having the, 2 palms of protein, 2 handfuls of carbohydrate or fruit, and 2 thumbs of fat at breakfast, lunch, and dinner with a fist of veggies at all those. And it still is allotted, his budget, this per se still allows for a couple handfuls of carbohydrate or fruit kind of within those snacks or desserts or along those lines as well. Yeah. We would not likely make changes to all these meals at once. And I said likely, but definitely, I'll edit that too. We might pick one meal to start with, or even a portion of one meal to start with. But it's to kind of show you, hey, this is where we would be going with Roger over the course of the next few months, right? Yeah. So Roger's new day, how could we design plates that fit those hand portions? His old breakfast is here again: the protein and peanut butter shake, 2 pieces of toast, and coffee. We might, over the course of time, progress him towards something like having 4 eggs with some spinach in those eggs. Maybe he still has that protein shake, but maybe he swaps the toast out for a couple pieces of fruit. So he was already doing some good things in this breakfast. He already had some protein. He was having coffee at home, not going through the Starbucks drive-through and getting a 500-calorie pumped up sugary drink, right? But how can that be even better? We could get him even more protein intake in this breakfast, swapping the toast for fruit, gives him some more nutrient dense carbohydrate intake. It also might make him feel full longer. So this is just now a good, satiating, nutritious breakfast.
And sneaking in some veggies.
Sneaking in some veggies. Yeah. He could also blend that veggies up in the protein shake if that was the way that hit it better for him. Whatever is convenient and appealing to you, which we'll talk about more later. Lunch. So his old lunch was, out to eat, Chipotle burrito and chips. I love Chipotle. I hate to shame Chipotle in this presentation, but a healthier lunch for Roger would be, making more food at dinner and then just bringing leftovers that fit his hand portion plan to lunch the next day. Again, there's a lot of different ways he could have cleaned this lunch up, but that's one, easy option for many.
Especially because he's been doing so well with his dinner.
Yeah,
It's like,
his
hey,
dinner was awesome.
let's just make a little bit more. You already got it. You're already doing it. It's not that much, not hard, that difficult to make that adjustment.
Yep. So let's not mess with his dinner at all. This guy was doing great there. Hey, we had low hanging fruit elsewhere to improve. Let's just not touch dinner at all. And then his snacks. He's a little more satiated after that morning breakfast. So one snack kind of just faded away. Hey, can we get you to snack on some veggies instead of crackers when you get home in the afternoon? And hey, at this point, he can probably still enjoy a small dessert and a glass of wine in the evening, but with how well he's doing elsewhere in the day. So again, just to reiterate, we wouldn't be like, hey, here's your new meal plan. Go home and do all this today. But this is something that we could progress to with Roger, one kind of habit at a time over the course of the next few months.
And Roger, like we might say, okay, looking at your you recorded all these meals. Where do you feel like you're doing well? Hey, Roger, what do you feel like would be a good place to start? Great, we'll start there. So that's kind of what we do in more of a real life situation here. We're trying to just kind of look through the day and see some of those bigger changes that we might make. Again, like Kyle said, a few months down the road, and just so we kind of have, again, our plan of how we're going to go from point A to point B.
Yeah, but whatever change you are most excited about would be the easiest to you, or would make the most difference. Sometimes that's all three things align, and that's great. But any of those options are fine to pick first. What's easiest, appealing. What am I excited about? Make that change first. So looking at Roger's new typical day, plugged back into MyFitnessPal, you see that this brings him down to that around 2,600 calorie mark. And that was kind of in that 13 to 15 times his goal body weight range. That was about 700 or so less than his previous day. So again, we wouldn't do that all at once, but that's just again where he could be getting to. So from off that, what's Roger's next step? Building his grocery list. So what does he need to do now? So take time to think about what you will need for the week ahead. So Roger, he might need to plan ahead to go buy eggs and spinach and fruit for the morning. If he's working on the lunch habit, he's going to need to just buy what he was already buying for dinner, but buy bigger portions of that so that he has leftovers available for lunch. He might need to have some snackable veggies available, some carrots or celery or bell peppers or whatever he likes the most. Okay. How to prepare meals. That's another step that's going to need to be thought about. So how are you going to take the time to make these new meals, to make these changes? Roger's previous breakfast was pretty quick and easy. He's going to need to make some time in the morning to make his eggs. And that's also a potential hurdle. Maybe he won't like that. We'll need to think of a different strategy for the morning. figure out how his dinner prep changes to make enough for lunch. Does he want to, make a bunch of food on Sunday and just have all his Tupperware set for the week, or does he just prefer to make a little more each night and just have the leftovers the next day because he likes cooking each night? TBD. I don't know. We have to ask Roger. But just, again, those are just things you'll need to think about. How do I actually fit this into my life and make this my new normal? Yeah. And then lastly, how to adjust if the plan doesn't go well. Okay. So what's the issue, first of all? Did you forget to make the changes? Right. Well, I've been trying to remember to swap out this for fruit, but I just keep every time I go to the store, I just forget and I don't buy it, and I don't know, whatever it is. Use reminders. Put the new food in obvious spots. Give yourself just reminders. Change your environment to help you remember to do these things. Okay. Possible issue number two, where the change is not appealing. Okay. We'll pick something you're excited about doing. Don't be like, okay, I really need to eat more vegetables and I hate Brussels sprouts. So I'm gonna do that one. I just need to prove to myself that I can do it, that I'm tough. Don't do that. Pick something you're excited about doing. Where the change is too difficult. So you should instead pick changes that are convenient and easy. So again, if you're that's one reason to not just change everything at once, but it's also a reason that, hey, if you have you know, long work day and kids to take care of when you get home, maybe don't plan a dinner that's going to take you an hour to prepare. There's nothing wrong with still planning convenient choices as long as they're still, getting you, closer to where you want to go. Right. And then lastly, where the change is not rewarding. Did you make the change but not see the results you expected? Yeah, so let's talk about that one a little more. First of all, we love the principle from Precision Nutrition. There is no failure, only feedback. Yeah. So if you made a change and just didn't get the results you wanted, doesn't mean you screwed up or that you are a failure. Hey, you just learned something new, and you're going to use that information to make a better next decision, right? So let's first, come back to this slide from part one, nutrition part one, our energy balance equation. And so if you made a change to change the calories inside of this equation, right? And the total balance didn't change. Your weight didn't change. It doesn't mean this equation doesn't work or is broken. It just means something else in the equation changed also to keep you at neutral. Say if your goal is to lose or gain weight, right? So what could that be? Maybe the change you consciously made was offset by another subconscious change. Okay, in the morning, I removed X from my diet and replaced it with Y, and I know that that's a lower calorie intake option. Hey, but maybe I didn't realize that at dinner I had more of this, or when my snack changed from this to this, or et cetera, et cetera. There just might be something else that you didn't realize that changed in response to something else that you did consciously change.
Yeah, and so common, like again, with Roger and his kids, like, hey, I'm preparing them, I'll just eat this, eat that. Or I do it all the time with my kids and they didn't finish it. I'm not gonna throw it away. I'm just gonna, but I was like, I didn't count that. I didn't write it down because it wasn't something I ate or purposely, consciously ate. It was almost subconsciously. I just shoved it in. Yeah. And down the line, like, oh, why is this not working? I swear I'm doing everything I'm supposed to. It's amazing how these little things can kind of just sneak in.
Or people who get really meticulous about their weekday, but then their weekend, they just kind of like, oh, but the weekend's whatever. Well, maybe their weekend was already kind of bad. And now it got really bad, even though the weekdays got tighter. So on average, their balance is still the same. Again, just something along those lines could have occurred. So your action is just to kind of reassess with your tracking tools we discussed earlier. Just look again. Hey, what am I doing? Is there anything else going on that I need to that I should be aware of? Right. Another reason that you might not have seen the results you expected is because your body may have made some other adaptation to maintain homeostasis. Change of any kind takes energy, and your brain would rather maintain homeostasis. It's easier for it. It takes less energy. So if you're taking in less caloric intake, your body might expend a little less non-exercise activity energy. So you might fidget a little less. You might pace around the room a little less. Without even realizing it. You just might naturally decrease caloric expenditure because caloric intake decreased as well. Or there's other processes your body could do to, again, kind of keep itself around neutral. So if that's what happened, and doesn't really, you can only control what you can control. So make another change and see what happens. Essentially, it's kind of, you just go through the process again. Okay, I made that change. Okay, well, this is my new baseline now. If I'm what now am I going to change from here to try to move that needle again? Yeah. So in summary, determine your goal. What am I trying to do? Determine your current baseline. Where am I at right now? Make a change. Yeah, so we talked about again about figuring out your protein goals or your total caloric intake goals, or I'm trying to adjust my hand portions up or down. I'm trying to change this portion of this one meal to this thing instead, whatever it is, make a change, reassess. How did that go? Okay. And then just repeat as needed. If the first change you made got you to where you want to go, or it's still getting you towards where you want to go, maybe you don't need to add anything else in right now. Hey, but whenever you hit a plateau again, if that's not where you want to be, well, then make another change. And this process basically just goes on for the rest of your life. These are the tools you have to get yourself where you want to go and stay there.
And I'd encourage too, like when you make that change, don't reassess a day later and go, oh, it didn't work. Give yourself some time to see that through. Let your body make that adaptation and change. And you might be great. Like again, like I was talking about, hey, my weekdays days 1 through 5, I was awesome. And then on the weekend, I kind of let loose a little bit. And it's like, do I, when I reassess, oh, hey, this didn't work. Well, let's run that for, I generally like people to do it for at least a couple of weeks. Create that one change, that one habit, stick with it for a couple of weeks, then reassess where we at, think back, reflect, and then move forward. What do I want to do? Am I making good progress? Do I need to change this? Or, hey, I found out when I did this, instead of training 3 times a week, like I went to 2 times a week because I had this extra thing for my kid this past month. And that could have been enough just to kind of keep things stagnant when you're like, what the heck? So just give it time to change and be real with yourself, be honest. This is a long journey. We're not trying to do it. Even Roger here, he's given himself 6 months, which is great. The hard part is like, hey, in 3 weeks, I got my reunion, what do we got to do right now? I'll train 6 days a week. Let's go. And it's just like, that's not long-term. That's not sustainable. That's not a lot of these things that we talked about. So, give Roger here a lot of credit. He's thinking ahead. He's planning. He's, getting his wife and his kids involved so they can help, support him through this process. There's just that social support system again, is just so important. But just give yourself that time, give yourself some grace and, enjoy the journey, enjoy the process.
Yeah. And maybe just to, touch back to part 1 again, just remember those main concepts: your energy balance equation, focus on protein, fruits and veg, whole food. If you made a change that gets you closer to those concepts, you did a good thing, regardless of whether or not, again, all these other factors going on in your world and your life allowed you to see it on a scale or see it on a measuring tape or see your pant size change in the course of that month. If you, started eating more broccoli with dinner, I guarantee that wasn't a bad thing for you for the most part, right? So just, try to get yourself closer to those main concepts. Again, use the tools we went over today to have a system in place that helps you, get yourself where you want to go.
Yeah, and then pick the habits. The results we don't know, but pick that habit, be consistent, see how it goes, reassess, go from there. Yeah, this is a fun journey. I mean, we're always experimenting, changing, trying out new things, and that. Like I said, have fun with that.
Yeah, and again, if you are either a member with us in person at Prevail Conditioning or a member of Team Thrive, just remember that you have access to Precision Nutrition Pro Coach,
Yep.
Which we cannot recommend enough as an automated nutrition coach that's going to really guide you through this process and does a fantastic job of just helping you start with real simple stuff but again, just have a system to build all these habits. So
Figure out what works for you. It's individualized to you based upon how you make all these choices and decisions.
yeah, big concepts, many methods that to get you to those concepts. Thanks for watching or listening, and we'll catch you next time.